All right, it's 7 o'clock, so the meeting will come to order. Welcome everybody to the Tiger Planning Commission public meeting. Today is June 21st, 2021, the first full day of summer, and hope everybody's keeping their cool. So Doreen, may we have a roll call, please?
President Hu?
Here.
Vice President Jackson?
Present.
Commissioner Brooke?
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Dick?
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Miranda? Commissioner Quinones?
Here.
Commissioner K7? Commissioner Roberts?
Here.
Commissioner Shook?
Here.
Commissioner Watson?
Here.
And Commissioner Whitehurst?
Thank you, Doreen. Thank you, commissioners. So next item on the agenda is communications. Commissioner, do you have anything you wish to share with the commission since our last meeting in May? I see no hands up. Oh, Commissioner Watson, please go ahead.
Hi. The Transportation CAC met last Tuesday and reviewed progress, and there's a new survey out that I think everybody's going to be receiving postcards for, and yeah.
Great. Is that all?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Watson. Commissioner Jackson, please go ahead.
So I just wanted to remind everybody, both commissioners and public, there was a Tigers on the Move meeting on June 2nd, which unfortunately I was not able to attend, but there's a related online open house and survey for prioritizing infrastructure projects in the city's future, and I would encourage everyone to take a look at that and put your 2 cents in.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. Yeah, I participate in the survey, and it's, hopefully it's helpful. Okay, so next, consideration of minutes from the April 19th and May 3rd. Commissioner, do you have any addition, deletion, or correction you wish to report? All right, I see none, so I declare the minutes from both meetings approved. All right, so let's move on to the main agenda item of the evening, public hearing. I will open the public hearing for Oregon 217 Auxiliary Lane CPA 2020-3 SLR 20-10, and the case is the applicants, the Oregon Department of Transportation, ODOT, is requesting a comprehensive plan amendment to the wetland and stream corridor map and a sensitive land review for the proposed Oregon Highway 217 Auxiliary Lane project. The project will impact 0.78 acres of Tiger significant wetland and 4.67 acres of Tiger significant wetland buffer. And the total area requested for removal from the significant wetland inventory is 5.45 acres. So before I invite the staff to give their staff report, I just want to remind the public that if you want to call in to provide comments or testimony, the phone number to call is 503-966-4101. Again, the phone number is 503-966-4101. All right, so now I will invite a staff member to present their report. It will be presented by Associate Planner Monica Belladieu. Good evening, Monica.
Good evening. Let me pull up my presentation. All right. So good evening, President Hu. My name is Monica Bilodeau, and the item before you tonight is the OR 217, the Auxiliary Lanes Comprehensive Plan Amendment. And you gave a pretty good little quick summary that I have also included here. So ODOT is proposing adding the auxiliary lanes to OR 217 north and southbound, and I have a figure to show as well. And basically, this is going to result in impacts to 0.78 acres of tigered significant wetland. And the 4.67 acres is basically tigered significant wetland that is already being impacted within the existing OR 217 travel lanes. So just to be clear on that. So the removal is, so it's somewhat clear, you know, cleaning up the 4.67, but the total request, the total removal will be the 5.45 acres that will be removed from the tigered significant wetlands inventory. So here's kind of a general map. I don't have the best figures, and the applicant hopefully can go through some of those a little more in depth. But these are kind of the sensitive areas that are right alongside OR 217. And so these minor impacts that we have expanding those auxiliary lanes are impacting some of these areas. So the project need, it's basically to address the regional safety and the mobility needs of the region. And ODOT is focusing on these low cost, kind of effective and immediate solutions in order to improve the bottleneck locations on 217. So ODOT is proposing on adding these auxiliary lanes and continuing part of this cost-effective approach to improve and effectively manage the existing freeway. So as part of the comp plan amendment, the Goal 5 ESEE analysis is required, and it involves evaluating the trade-offs associated with the different levels of natural resources protection. So the evaluation process that was done identified the consequences of fully allowing the impacts, limiting and prohibiting the conflicting use in the areas that contain that tigered significant natural resource. So this analysis concluded that limiting the conflicting use will result in the most beneficial consequences of the three protection scenarios, and allows for kind of the benefits to be realized with improving the safety and the mobility needs. So as part of this package, the mitigation that that ODOT is proposing, it will be purchasing wetland mitigation bank credits to replace the function and values of wetland lost from the impacts. And the bank credits are going to be purchased at the Bobcat Marsh Wetland Mitigation Bank, which is nearby in the Jackson Bottom Wetlands Preserve in the Tualatin watershed. So there'll be a total of 0.85 acre of mitigation, and that's going to be combined with purchasing within this mitigation bank and also some mitigation on the project site, improving and doing some revegetation there. So kind of to wrap this up, the staff recommendation is that we would recommend to City Council at the July 13th hearing for approval of the comprehensive plan amendment and sensitive lands review, subject to the findings and recommended conditions of approval in the staff report. And staff is available to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Monica. Commissioners, that was the staff presentation. It's time for questioning. I will give you opportunities for more questioning before deliberation, but if you have any questions for Monica right now, please raise your hand. Yes, Commissioner Dick, please go ahead.
Hi, Monica. So I'm on the Parks Board as well, and I have a huge thing against removing sensitive wetland areas, whether you're trading it or not. Once it's gone, it never is back. And it's only going to cause a lot of congestion problems, but the removal of the wetlands, I just don't understand who thought it would be a great idea, I guess. I'm so against that.
Commissioner Dick, so right now is the time for questioning. So was that a comment or was that a question?
Okay, so my question is, who decided and why did they decide to remove sensitive wetlands to add another lane of cars?
Okay.
Yeah, I can touch on that. You know, I don't know, you know, maybe ODOT representatives can go into detail of the history of, you know, the placement of 217 and, you know, unfortunately the location of 217, you know, is placed in a way that there's wetlands right adjacent to it. More than likely when 217 was put in, they had impacts. So now we're left with this existing freeway, and we're trying to minimize the impacts as much as possible by, you know, only adding these auxiliary lanes to help with traffic and mobility of the region without just completely adding, you know, additional lanes on either side. So we are limiting that impact, but unfortunately the wetlands have been existing, and they are existing right adjacent to the freeway there. I don't know if that gets exactly at your question or concern, but we're left with an existing freeway and trying to do the minimal impacts as we can.
I understand that it's to help reduce traffic, maybe, or give a better road for it to go on. But when you remove wetlands, you remove wildlife, you remove life. And so I guess I wonder why they've decided to enlarge 217 now.
Yeah, I think that will be a good understanding if the applicant can respond to some of those. That would be great.
Okay. Commissioner Jackson, do you have questions for staff?
Yeah, I was a little curious on kind of the background of when or how the original wetland designation happened, because as I understand it, the bulk of the area we're talking about isn't even functional wetland anymore. It's already degraded. So I was curious if we knew if these were mapped as wetlands after they had already been degraded, or they were originally wetlands and had essentially been protected, but just their proximity to 217 degraded them over time.
Good
Yeah,
evening.
Tom, if you want to give a little bit of that history, that would be wonderful.
Sure. This is Tom McGuire. I'm the Assistant Community Development Director for Tigard. So it's actually mostly buffer. It's mostly the 50-foot buffer around the wetlands that's in that big number, and the 50-foot buffer, you know, applies. So when they did the significant wetland inventory, they identified the wetlands generally. Wetlands can change location over time, and in this case, it's been it would have been mid-90s probably when those were first delineated and added to the significant wetlands map. And then we add the 50-foot buffer, and the regulatory scheme that we have is we treat the wetland and the buffer the same as far as the regulations are concerned. So what you're seeing essentially is shoulder, engineered fill, and some portions of roads here or there that's within the 50-foot buffer. So that wouldn't actually be significant wetland, because we have ODOT go out and do a delineation prior to them submitting their application. So we have the actual wetland boundaries delineated, and then we add the 50 feet to that. Is that helpful?
I believe so. I guess kind of to clarify that in my brain. So the expectation would not be that when, if we approved this and the auxiliary lanes were built, the expectation would not be that there'd be further degradation than at the edges at that point. Did that make sense?
I'm not following you on that question. I mean, they're expanding the lanes, so there will be some wetland fill and some actual buffer impacts, but that's the smaller number.
Okay.
But we get the really big number because there's a lot of that buffer that extends out over existing development.
Okay.
And, I don't want to necessarily at this point go into a long history about why that is, but it's essentially that safe harbor route that the city of Tigard took. It was easier for the city to go that route, but it leaves us with a lot less flexibility or next to none in the way of flexibility with regulations. So that was the trade-off of doing a bunch of work back then or going to safe harbor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. Thank you, Tom. Commissioner Dick, your hands is still up. Do you have more questions or?
Sorry, no.
Okay,
Thanks.
good.
Just thank you.
Thank you. No, great. So I have one question, Monica. Are there any sound walls on the steep slope of sensitive land area? I know there are sound walls being erected in the sensitive area, but are they within steep slopes?
Some of those are engineered fill alongside the freeway there.
Okay.
So I believe that, I don't know the exact percentage of the slope there, but I know some of them get close to that because it's a lot of that, the already existing fill areas.
Oh, the reason I ask is because one of the approval criteria is that in sensitive land application within the steep slope, you said that you said the retaining wall was constructed within the project will follow the recommendation of all the structure spec. So I'm just wondering if retaining wall include any, does retaining wall include any sound wall?
We could have the applicant address that when they do their presentation.
Okay.
They can address that question and they can address Commissioner Dick's question about the reasons behind the need for the freeway expansion.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so commissioners, do we have any more questions for staff at this point? We will have another opportunity before deliberation. Okay, I see none. So thank you, Monica, for now. So next up will be applicant's presentation, and it will be representative from ODOT. And who will be the ODOT rep? Oh, hi.
Hi, good evening. So
Good
my
evening.
name's Reed. My name's Reed Stapleton. I'm a planner with Dow, and we have Kelly Martin from ODOT who is going to lead off, and we're going to try to pull this off where I think I'm going to manage the PowerPoint, and she'll be kicking things off and then handing things over to me midway through. So Monica, do I have the ability to send control over my way to manage this?
Yeah, do you see the option at the bottom to share a screen?
Yes. I do. Okay, can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Kelly, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Okay, hi there. So my name is Kelly Martin. I am the ODOT project manager on this project, and I'm just going to give you a quick overview of. Reed, do you want to move forward a couple of right there? I'm going to give you a quick overview of what the project is and the purpose of the project, and then I will let Reed get more into the specifics of the land use areas and the impacts. So the project purpose is to improve the safety and help prevent bottlenecks on OR 217 between Beaverton Hillsdale Highway and Oregon 99W. By adding auxiliary lanes. The issue is that we have 10 interchanges in just over 7 miles, and these are super short merging distances and a very high traffic volume in the area, which leads to merging conflicts and high crash rates and travel delays. Our schedule for construction is late 2021 and continues through 2025. This project is a total cost of about $134 million, which is mostly funded by ODOT, the Keep Oregon Moving House Bill 2017, and then in partnership with the city of Beaverton and with Washington County for some additional bike and ped routes. We've been doing a lot of coordination with other agencies. We've had multiple meetings with the city of Tigard, the city engineer, and their staff to discuss the project and to coordinate with the city projects. We've been working directly with Zach Morris, who has dispersed our plans for review and feedback at DAP, advanced plans, and final milestones, where we have received City of Tigard feedback and incorporated that feedback into our plans. We've presented to the City of Tigard City Council twice, once in August of 2019 and once in April of 2021. The auxiliary lanes help to reduce the bottlenecks by giving drivers more space and time to merge safely. Southbound auxiliary lanes will run between Beaverton Hillsdale Highway and Oregon 99W. The northbound lanes will run from 99W to Greenberg Road, and a second auxiliary lane will continue up to Shoals Ferry Road. Closures will include 24/7 single lane closures and full one-way directional closures. We're doing a lot of bike and ped improvements. We're going to widen the sidewalk on the north side of Denny Road. I want to explain that a lot of these bike ped improvements are in the city of Beaverton because we're completing the bike trail within the project limits, and most of the area within Tigard is already up to date or connected versus there was a lot of gaps in Beaverton. So we're extending the Fano Creek Trail along the east side of 217 up to Allen Boulevard. There's going to be new sidewalk and bike lanes on the Northern Hall Boulevard overpass, and we're replacing the Southern Hall Boulevard overpass, which will include new sidewalks and bike lanes. The Southern Hall Boulevard overpass replacement, the overpass will need to be rebuilt and make room for auxiliary lanes that pass under it, and the vehicle lanes in both directions will be closed for 6 to 9 months on Hall Boulevard. Bikes and peds will have access throughout the construction. We're going to build a temporary bridge across 217 for bike and ped access. And the new overpass will be earthquake resilient, ADA compliant, have wider sidewalks and bike lanes. We are doing some additional elements in this project, including safety elements on Shoals Ferry Road, Allen and Denny overpasses, including new bridge decks, adding protective screening, and improving bridge railing. There are 4 sound wall locations that were voted on by the benefited residents in 2019, and all detour routes will be established in partnership with local jurisdictions. Next slide, please. So we've been doing a lot of outreach on this project. We've had open houses in May of 2018, May of 2019, November, December of 2020. We did an online open house. We're going to be doing another open house in November or December of 2021, just before construction starts. We had sound wall outreach. In addition to what I just talked about for the main project, we also had sound wall outreach, open houses in June of 2019 and September of 2019, and the sound wall vote was in the fall of 2019. We've attended 2 City of Tigard open house events and met with multiple neighborhood associations as they have been requested. We've have a mailing list for anyone who would like to be kept up to date on the project and as it proceeds into construction. And I am going to share in the chat our website if you want to get into more detail about the project specifically. And questions can be directed to our public involvement person, Lily Boycourt, and her contact information will also be, I will also put that in the chat. So Reed, it's back to you.
Great, thank you, Kelly. So Kelly spoke to a lot of the general outreach, the extensive outreach that's happened for the project as a whole. I'll talk a little bit about the public outreach specific to this application. So we had a public meeting in August of 2019, which of course is pre-COVID. So this was a somewhat normal-ish public meeting compared to some of the ones we've had over the last year. We posted 6 notice signs along the route. There were over 350 invites mailed, and we had 16 neighbors attend that meeting. So, you know, relatively low turnout, I suppose, compared to the number of invites that were sent. And the comments that were received really spanned the gamut of you know, the overall project, and interestingly weren't so much focused on the environmental impacts of the project, which is of course the nature of this permit request. But we received comments on culvert crossings, hydrology impacts, sound walls, and then there was of course a lot of interest about just the overall improvements to the road facility, and when's the project occurring, what's the staging of it, what's the traffic management going to look like, that sort of thing. So a lot of general interest in the project, and the number of inquiries specific to the wetlands and the environmental effects were fairly minor, fairly few. So Monica did a great job of summarizing the application. So I think a lot of this is somewhat redundant of her presentation. So I'll try to breeze through anything that fits that category. But we've got, of course, 6 mapped significant wetlands that are affected by the project. And that significant area, what's deemed significant, includes that 50-foot vegetated corridor. So that is why you see impacts and mapped areas that really exceed the limits of what is actual functional wetland out in the field. Mitigation is planned at the Bobcat Marsh Wetland Mitigation Bank, which is in the Jackson Bottom Wetland Preserve area. That functioning wetland is there and in place, and provides that sort of temporal benefit in that it's already out there and functioning, and that is the location where the wetland impacts will be mitigated. You can see this map identifies the 2 primary complexes of wetland that are within the project area in the city of Tigard. You've got the Ash Creek complex, which is in kind of the northern section that is within the city and around Greenberg Road. And then you've got the Red Rock Creek complex, which is near the Highway 99 interchange on the south side of that interchange. And this is a table you probably recognize from the application materials, but I thought we would call attention to it just because it really spotlights down here the 33,800 square feet of significant wetland impact, which again is inclusive of that vegetated corridor buffer. So the actual wetland area is about 2/3 of that. And then that much larger number, which is anything that fits the definition of significant wetland, whether or not it's actually in the field and functioning. So existing built features that currently fall within that overlay or that map projection. And then you can see here that the actual impacted vegetated corridor is substantially less than the significant wetland that occurs in the immediate project corridor. So about 2/3 of that significant wetland area would be avoided by the project. And this table spotlights the various significant wetlands and how much of each of those wetlands is mitigated at the Bobcat Marsh mitigation bank. So the majority of the mitigation would occur at the Bobcat Marsh mitigation bank, and then remaining vegetated corridor areas would be mitigated where there's opportunities available adjacent to the existing wetlands within the corridor. So that is all that we had prepared for the evening, but we've got the leaders of the project design team here who are available to answer any questions that you have, including Kelly and representatives from ODOT. I know there was a question about the retaining walls and if there are any retaining walls on the steep slopes. And I think Monica mentioned this, that the steep slopes within the project corridor are predominantly, if not all, engineered slopes on off-ramps and on-ramps. And so I'm not aware of any kind of native topographic steep slopes that occur. But just scanning through the design materials, kind of while Kelly was speaking, I haven't seen any that would fit or fall within those polygons within our project design. But if there's a specific question or concern there, I'd be happy to kind of mine our brain trust here to confirm or validate that.
Thank you, Reed. So with regard to that question, I asked that question because one of the applicable requirement was that structure built on steep slopes in sensitive land area must be appropriately sited and designed to ensure structural stability and proper drainage of foundation and all those requirements. And in the staff report, it was stated that there will be retaining walls on the steep slope, and they will be in compliance with all those requirements. So my question was, are there any sound walls as well on the steep slope? Because if there's none, then I have no further question. But if there is, then I think it should be stated that sound walls on steep slopes should also comply with the requirements. So my question is, are there sound walls being constructed at the steep slope of the sensitive land area?
I'm not aware of any. I'm looking at the design. I'm not seeing them. So
okay.
Yeah, I don't believe that there are.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's my question. So thank you, Reed and Kelly. So commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicants? Commissioner Roberts, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. This may be a bit tangential, but as effectively, I think we're swapping wetlands here for additional wetlands in the Bobcat Marsh. Is that a true statement?
Yes. I mean, essentially that is true.
Okay. And so then my follow-up is, this whole thing is to preserve a habitat for wildlife. And So is the wildlife that lives here going to be significantly different than the wildlife in the Bobcat Marsh? So, I mean, are we like taking away from bobcats and giving it to herons or something? Or is it pretty much an equal kind of a thing? That's what I'm wondering, is are we changing the diversity, and is it a significant change in diversity when we do this, recognizing that some animals have their territories and, you know, it'll be different for each one? That's my question.
Yeah, and I'm going to see if anyone on my team wants to kick me and step in here, but
Sure.
it doesn't seem like it's happening, so I'll go for it. So,
Reed, this
sorry?
is James.
Oh,
This is
okay.
James. I can jump in here.
Okay. Thanks, James.
Yeah, my name is James Dufla. I'm with Dow. I work on behalf of ODOT on the project. I'm an environmental specialist. To answer your question, the habitats that we are trading off, as you say, are going to be very similar habitats. We have to mitigate the same class of wetland that we impact is the credit that we have to buy at the mitigation site. And so that in general, the habitat value is going to be very similar. There's undoubtedly some habitat impacts for the species that live locally here in these features, but those overall on a macro level, those will be offset through the Bobcat Marsh purchase.
Got it. So it's going to be like, for example, birds for birds, not birds for beavers. So cool. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you. Commissioner Watson, please go ahead.
Hi, this may be a continuation for James. I was hoping that somebody would kind of go through the mitigation table on, I think it's page 19, table 2. It summarizes the amount of wetlands and the various sections of wetland that are impacted, and then what is getting mitigated. And just the the amount of mitigation that's occurring, and sort of what you mean by mitigate, or what is meant by mitigation for everyone. So it might help to ease the concept of affecting wetlands if we know that we're going to have these positive, what are the effects of mitigating in different areas, as well as adding the pedestrian paths and all of those things. Sort of what is the sell on mitigation?
Right. So to break the mitigation down, I think as Tom pretty clearly stated, we have essentially wetland impacts and wetland buffer impacts, and those are the vegetated corridors. And so that's how we broke our mitigation down. The Bobcat Marsh purchase is direct wetland impacts. So those are those areas we went out and we delineated the boundary, and that's where those credits go. And then for the vegetated corridor, we offset that on site through the creation of additional or wider vegetated corridor areas. So we went and we found a wetland that remains on our site. And then instead of a 50-foot buffer, we extended that buffer out and dedicated that to clean water services. And we will plant it and add a lot more habitat than currently exists. It's a mode maintained area. So it's essentially creating what was lost in the areas where we have our sliver impacts. And I guess I'd say that the positive outcome here when we talk about mitigation is that, in some of these areas where we have really degraded, especially with the vegetated corridors, most of them through the corridor degraded. One of the positive outcomes is we are able to take those degraded areas, lump them into a larger, and in our case, 3 larger sites for mitigation, and bring them up to a good corridor condition. So that's a corridor that actually has some trees, some shrubs, good canopy cover. So over time, we will achieve that. Whereas right now we have small sliver, narrow, poor condition corridors. So I think, yeah, go ahead.
And native planting and just sort of elaborate upon what mitigation entails. I think that might help a little bit.
Yeah, the vegetated corridor mitigation, we have to follow Clean Water Services requirements. So those are spelled out pretty clearly in the design and construction standards, and they do require 100% native plantings. We have to use native plant species from their lists. So that is what we've done. It is a pretty high density of planting. So we have a high density of shrubs, high density of trees, and then those areas have to be maintained during an establishment period of no less than 2 years and protected in perpetuity.
And if there's greater pedestrian and bike access to these areas as well as a part of the project, then there's going to be more education and there's going to be more public awareness of the wetlands and the need for their preservation.
Yes, I think that is a good general statement. As far as within the city limits of Tigard, the access to the wetlands, I think in general remains unchanged. Most of these wetlands directly abut the freeway with limited or non-existent actually public access. It's a limited access freeway.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I thought you are in extending the trail, correct?
The trail segment, I think that Kelly was mentioning, is in the city of Beaverton.
Right, but
right, yes,
that's a part of this project.
Yes, as part of this project, we are extending the trail, but it is the extensions are all in Beaverton.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you for your help.
Thank you. Commissioner Jackson, please go ahead.
So I think somewhat of a follow-up to that. I may be looking at the same table. I'm looking at page 14 of the ESEE report. So there's, for the vegetated corridor mitigation, it's listed at 5,520, but then there's further down, there's a row for the additional 10% for public benefit at 3,380. Is that 3,300 amount all additional on-site VC mitigation, or does that go somewhere else?
It is all additional on-site.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, do you have any more questions for the applicant? I have one question. Thanks to the commissioners for clarifying the extent or provide more detail for the trade-off, but just I want to focus on the trade-off or the mitigation measures on site. So just to be clear, follow up on Commissioner Watson's question. Maybe this is a question for James. So overall, after the project is done, will there be a net increase in pave area in this sensitive area, or it will be pretty much a wash? What's the estimate?
There will be a net increase in impervious surface as a result of this project. Yes. Okay.
So as you know, our climate is getting warmer and warmer. So and paved areas will increase our local temperature. I'm not an expert, but that's what I heard. But you can correct me. So if that's correct, are there any? I don't know if this for this project, but at least in the future, are there any plans to mitigate that locally instead of buying a credit somewhere else? We can further mitigate climate change, the effect of climate change on pave from additional pave areas.
I can't speak to the future and the direction of policy and how ODOT will handle their projects. But for this project in particular, I can say that we are required by local, state, and federal requirements to treat and detain our stormwater from the project. And that's one of the maybe one of the biggest benefits coming out of this project is there is quite a significant amount of impervious that is currently within the corridor that goes untreated. So it's not detained and it's not treated for water quality. And so we're going to capture a dramatic amount over what we are installing, and we're going to treat and detain all of that and part of our treatment and detention will have a positive impact on temperature of the stormwater coming from those impervious surfaces. In fact, a part of our proposal involves underground detention, which will take water from the surface and detain it in underground vaults prior to discharge. So that will have an overall positive impact. And that's right on site within our corridor. All of our stormwater is, well, the vast majority of our stormwater treatment is right here on site in the corridor. So that's how some of it is addressed. Some of your concern is addressed for this project. As far as in the future, I can't really speak to that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I don't. So I assume it's not the practice right now to systematically measure street temperature, road temperature at this point. I guess we are not there yet.
No, but there are things like temperature TMDLs for waterways that DEQ manages. And so when we hit a waterway with a TMDL or a temperature problem, a known temperature issue, those can be things that we have to address through our stormwater management process.
Okay, thank you very much. So I see Commissioner Dick, you have a question. Go ahead.
Hi. So on this project where you're trading out the wetlands, has anyone looked at the issue of migrating birds that come back year after year and the loss of wildlife to maintain the habitat within our area? And also that has to do with global warming as well. Did anyone consider the migration pattern of birds? Because they're not going to know to go to the other place. You can't put a sign up and say detour. So how does that happen, that wetlands are removed for pavement, I guess is my question.
And I'll do my best to answer that question. I think as far as addressing migratory birds, that is a very critical concern for ODOT. We don't want to especially harm any birds that are actively nesting on site. We don't want to impact their occupied nests or take their young. And so we have construction windows to avoid tree removal and nest removal during the nesting season. As far as the overall removal of habitat, unfortunately, that is something that comes along with the loss of wetlands. And one of the primary reasons we want to mitigate locally as best we can. And so Bobcat Marsh is within the watershed. It meets the goals of having as close as physically possible to the site of offsetting mitigation. And while there will be a loss of habitat on site, the overall habitat uplift within the watershed will hopefully replace some of those lost function and values.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Watson, we're going back to you.
Question, you're talking about, well, one of the benefits of the project is that there's going to be increased treatment of stormwater and therefore putting cleaner water back into the environment. And also, as a part of that, I'm kind of curious, is the drainage on the highway itself going to be improved? Driving through there sometimes, especially after a heavy rain, the highways can tend to have large puddles to the point that I drive a fairly tall truck, and you can hit a puddle and the wave washes over your windshield and you can't see for several seconds.
Right.
So it just a curiosity, is the drainage of the highway going to be improved as a part of this?
A general statement is yes, absolutely. Because of the work that we're doing, we have to address the conveyance, so the flow of water from that surface to the inlets for the stormwater system, and then to the outfalls and stormwater treatment. And so in general, that will be better. We're able to eliminate low spots, get everything piped and sized, headed in the right direction a little more efficiently. That's a general statement. For anywhere where we're doing work, it should generally be improved.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Commissioner Dick, your hand's still up. I assume you forgot to lower it.
Actually, I had one more question.
Okay, go ahead, please.
So in the preservation of wetlands and that you're moving the area to another basin to enlarge it, isn't that already a wetlands and all you're doing is drawing lines on a map?
Yeah, so the Bobcat Marsh Mitigation Bank was a project that was undertaken some time ago. So it does exist. It is a currently functioning wetland, and it continues to gain in function. But that is a wetland that likely would not have existed. The people who constructed it from something that did not exist or was in very degraded condition and not likely to come back on its own. So there was an investment to actually create that wetland for the purpose of offsetting future impacts.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I don't see any, oops. I don't see any more questions. So before we go on to the public testimony, I was reminded by Tom that I have to read statement from quasi-judicial hearing. So I'm going to do them retroactively. So the requirement statement for quasi-judicial hearing are the applicable approval criteria, those listed on page, I believe, 2 of staff report available online. And when you provide testimony, they must be directed toward the applicable approval criteria listed on page 2 of the staff report. And failure to raise an issue accompanied by statement or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue preclude appeal to the Land Use Board appeal based on that issue. So, commissioners, if you have any conflict of interest, please raise your hand and declare them. I see none. And does any commissioner wish to report any ex parte communication? Have you discussed this matter with any public members other than the staff? I see none. Tom, is that enough?
I think we usually ask about everybody visiting the site as well.
Okay, great. Commissioners.
And then if you could just remind the callers to state their name and their address. And that they have.
Thank you. Yeah. So Commissioner, if you have visited the site in the application, please raise your hand. Okay, so.
We drive by it every day.
Okay.
Is that the same as getting out and visiting the site? You know, that's the question, I guess.
I think if you have driven by 217, I think it qualifies you as visiting.
Okay, so, many times. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have Commissioner Jackson's. So can you raise your hand again, please? Okay, I have Commissioner Jackson, Commissioner Watson, Commissioner Dick, Commissioner Roberts, and me as well, Commissioner Hu. Commissioner Shook, have you visited 217?
Well, I've certainly driven by it, but I've not looked at or seen this area in any way inspected it, so it would have been not something that I would have looked at specifically.
Okay.
So I don't count that as a visit.
Okay, I will respect your decision, and as well as Commissioner Cuneno's.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I guess I drive on it, but it's not like I stopped and got out on the side of the road and walked the land.
Got it. Got it. And Commissioner Brooke just raised her hand as well. So, okay. Doreen, is that good?
Yes, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So now let's go to the public testimony. So again, member public, if you wish to provide comments or testimony, please call in at 503-966-4101. And I just want to remind you that speaker will be timed and limited to 3 minutes. And your time will begin after you clearly state your name and address, and please spell your last name. Okay. Commissioner Burke, you have a question before we go ahead, or? Nope, okay.
No, sorry, I just forgot to take my hand down.
No problem at all. I just wanted to make sure if you have any concern we address before we go ahead with the public testimony. So, Keelan, good evening. Do we have any caller on the line?
Yes, we have 2 callers. The first one's going to be Mr. Christian.
Okay. First caller, good evening. Please state your name and your address, and please spell your last name, please. And you have 3 minutes after you state your you spell your last name. Please go ahead.
Yeah, my last name is Krishnan, Krishnan, and I'm representing my client, Nadaraja. Last name is Nadarajah. And the address is 8623 Hamlet, Southwest Hamlet Street, Tigard.
Okay. You have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Our client owns land adjacent to 217 and in between Southwest and North Dakota on 217. And in 2005, our client requested Environmental Management System, EMS, a company which provides whether it is a wetland or not. And as per the report, it is not a wetland. For some reason, in Tigard, city of Tigard records, it is marked as wetland, and somebody opened up water in that land to make it look like it is a wetland, but actually it is not a wetland. And if somebody wants to do study on that, they can do a site visit, and they can confirm that it is not a wetland. So this is what I wanted to let everyone know. And a lot of people are concerned about wetland, but this is not a wetland. So I just wanted to express my client's interest and concern, because if it is considered as a wetland, and if the government takes over, the compensation for that land will be significantly lower than it is not a wetland. So I just want to give fair credit for the land, whatever it is worth for. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you go, commissioners, do we have any question for this caller? Commissioner Jackson, please go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry if I missed it, but were you speaking in opposition or in favor of this proposal?
I am favor of expanding 217. That's not a problem. But only thing is when it comes to compensation for the client, and also the land designation. So just wanted to confirm that if somebody, they have to do a site study to make sure that it is wetland. As per my client, when they did study in 2005, she has a report which said it is not a wetland as per the site study.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, do we have any more questions for this caller? Nope. Okay. Thank you so much. All right, Keelan.
Yes, our second caller is going to be Kimberly Carter.
Hello, caller. Please state your name and your address, and please clearly spell your last name. And you have 3 minutes after you have done that. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Kimberly Carter. It's Carter. And we live at 9115 Southwest North Dakota Street. My question is, it's more of a question rather than a testimony. We're in favor of the expansion project, but my question is, how will the city of Tigard notify residents whose land or property boundaries will be changing as a result of the auxiliary lanes? And how, when and how will we be notified if we are going to be impacted?
Thank you.
Would you like me to answer that?
If you will wait a little bit after at the end of all testimonies, so we can address them all together, that would be great. Thank you. Commissioners, before I go on, do we have any question for this caller, for Ms. Carter? I see none, so thank you very much. We will ask the staff to address your question. Keelan, do we have any more callers?
No more callers.
Oh, thank you so much. So we have 2 callers. One made a comment, and I don't know whether the city want to address that.
President Hu, we actually got one more caller right while I was answering that question. Do you want me to pass them through unscreened?
Sure. Go ahead.
All right, here they are.
Okay. Hello, caller. So you are on the Planning Commission public hearing. First, please state your name and your address, and please clearly spell your last name. And you have 3 minutes after you have done that. Please go ahead.
My name is Gail Hansen, and the address is 11500 Southwest Lomita and 11530 Southwest Lomita. I own 2 different duplexes.
Please go ahead.
Okay.
We have 2 callers. One made a comment, and I don't know whether the city wants to address that. President Hu, we actually got one more caller right while I was answering that question. Do you want me to pass them through on screen? Sure. Go ahead.
Hi, I don't.
Here they are. Okay. We have a very severe feedback. I don't know.
Okay.
You are on the Planning Commission public hearing. Gail, would you please mute your computer?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm on a regular phone. I'm on a regular phone, and so.
Sorry about the technical difficulties. So are you listening to the meeting on a computer?
I was listening to it on my cell phone, but I called you on a landline.
Okay, so can you mute the cell phone?
I walked away from it, so I can't.
Oh, okay.
Hear it.
Okay, so yeah,
okay,
so you have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Okay, I've just owned some property near there, and I don't really know how close it's going to come to it. But the first I heard of this was when I received a letter maybe about a month ago. Okay. And so I'm just wondering how this is impacting the neighborhood and how many properties it's going to be near. I'm not just worried about the wetlands. I'm worried about just, how much closer it's going to be to the neighborhoods where the houses are.
Okay. Did you happen to send Monica, the city staff, a letter opposing the?
I did.
Okay. So. Okay.
I just sent a letter with some concerns as to how it may be impacting the neighbors, the people in the neighborhood, the people who live there. I have no idea exactly where the lines are going to be and how close it's going to be to my property. I just know that I was informed and that I needed to make a statement today if I had any concerns. And because I don't know exactly where the lines are going to be, I don't know exactly how it's impacting all of the different neighbors in the neighborhood.
Got it. So before you go, commissioners, do we have any questions for Gail, for Ms. Hanson?
Not a question, but I think you are, you had sent a letter, you were concerned about sound and pollution, and we got that letter today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, correct. Okay. So thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. Keelan, do we have any more caller?
No callers at this time.
Okay, great. So now it's time, city staff or ODOT applicants. We have 3 callers. If you want to address their concern or answer their questions, please go ahead.
This is Kelly Martin from ODOT, and I was, I want to make sure that I have the correct question, but I heard how and when will property owners be notified if we are impacting their property? Is that basically what the question was?
Yeah, I think that also involved land use change from the city, but go ahead for ODOT's practice.
Okay. If a property is impacted by this project, we have already had conversations with the property owners. We're almost done with our right-of-way acquisition process. I think we've got 2 that are in litigation right now, and other than that, all other files have been settled. And so if you have a property close to 217 that is going to be directly impacted by the project, we have already reached out.
Thank you. So Monica or Tom, would you like to comment or answer questions about when the city will notify? I believe Ms. Carter mentioned change in land use, or Ms. Hanson doesn't know how far.
Monica.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so what we do is we notify much larger than what the actual project may impact. So we notify, 500 feet around the project area. So there's a large swath of owners that were notified, but that are not going to be impacted. But we want to invite them to understand the project and if they have any comments or concerns. But just like Miss Kelly Martin mentioned, she has already contacted all property owners with direct impact. So I think the concerns of the callers, I don't think their land is directly involved in this, but they are adjacent to this project.
Got it. Thank you. So before I close the public hearing, commissioners, do you have any? Oh, Tom is on the screen. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, hello. I was thinking if we wanted to give ODOT representatives a chance to respond to Ms. Carter's comments, because she also asked about, and I don't know if they have figures, but just generally, I think she also asked about the numbers of properties and people that are being affected by this in the city of Tigard, and sort of what is the I'm going to try to paraphrase what she said, but probably what she was asking is sort of how close are the nearest residences that might be affected by the construction. I think that's a fair assessment.
Kelly, would you like to answer that?
I was trying to figure out what exactly was being asked. How close are the residents that will be? I guess I don't fully understand what the question is. Are you talking like there are some residents that are right next door to where we're going to be doing construction?
Yeah, as I understood what she was asking, I think that is what she was asking, is just generally, what are the impacts and the how close there are residences or properties properties. I know you're directly impacting some and you're going through right-of-way right now, but I think she was asking about, and I don't know if you have any numbers, probably not, but.
Is there a minimum buffer size? This is Commissioner Watson. Is there a minimum buffer between the new roadways and the adjacent properties?
I don't know the answer to that question. Minimum buffers.
I think Commissioner Watson is asking does ODOT have a standard for you would never build a lane within so many feet or of a existing residence or something like that for this type of highway?
And that's why I don't know what
okay.
if there is a actual number that we have. I know that we have to own the property before we can put or work. I know that we've purchased temporary easements in locations where we needed another 10 feet or another 15 feet to work. But honestly, being super close to any residential properties, I can think of one, and it is already almost sitting on the freeway, and it's right at Shady Lane. And I think we're moving like 3 feet closer to that property. But other than that, I don't know that we're getting much closer to any other properties.
Okay, thank you. So if the public have any more questions, they are free to contact ODOT before the City Council hearing. Okay, so commissioners, any more questions for either the city staff or ODOT representative? I don't see any hands. Your last chance. Okay. Commissioner Shook, please go ahead.
All right, you coaxed a question out of me that I've been sitting here
Go ahead.
thinking about, and it's not really related to this wetland question that's before us, which is why I didn't really ask it. But the scope of this project is really significant, and it's obviously right next to this Washington Square project and improvement that the city's considering. And I just wanted to know if the city staff felt like this project complemented or somehow impeded that other project. Is there a conflict there, or does it seem like it's a supportive project? Because it looks to me like something that could really help that other project. Thank you.
Yeah, President Hood, I'd be happy to answer that question.
Go ahead.
I think if anything, it's complementary. It's for the most part within existing right-of-way with some minor expansions of right-of-way, and anything that makes that stretch safer and flow better is going to help what's happening at Washington Square. One of the big limiting factors at Washington Square is transportation and connection. So anything we can do to improve even slightly the traffic, transportation, facilities within and around Washington Square is going to help the project.
And to add to that, just so you guys are aware, we've had many meetings with multiple other governmental agencies that we have coordinated with to discuss all other projects that are happening in the area and to make sure that we are reaching out to the city, like the city engineers and their staff. And we've actually met with Washington Square and talked through the project with them, tried to really get out there and make sure that everybody knew what was happening and to get get their feedback and incorporate it into the project. That is how some of the bike ped improvements actually got added to the project because of feedback from other agencies.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Kelly. Commissioners, do you have any more questions? I know sometimes we ask a question that's not really on point, but we're so interested in the project, so we can't help ourselves. But it's fine. So so I see no questions. So I will close the public hearing, public meeting, or comment section. Sorry, and now we'll move on to deliberations. Commissioners, Commissioner Dick.
I am so against this, and I am for preservation of sensitive wetlands and nature, because once you pave it over, it's gone forever. And adding a part that's like drawing more lines on a map because it's already there, to me, is not a trade. And the migrating birds that come in, they've been coming there for maybe 100 years, who knows? I am just a believer that when you eat up sensitive property like that, it is a loss of life to all of us. It's just losing something that can never be gotten back. So if I could vote on this, I would be a no. 110%, just so you know. Wish they could vote. Darn.
Yeah.
Against wetlands
yeah.
eaten up. It's like environmental.
Right.
You disregard habitat for pavement, concrete, cars, exhaust. It's a no for me. Thanks.
Thank you. I understand. That's your opinion on the trade-off, and I totally understand. So, Commissioner Roberts, you have comments?
Yeah, I'm on the other side of the room. Sorry, Darlene. I have a couple thoughts. One is the traffic isn't going to change. It's continuing to grow as we continue to have more people, and people continue to drive badly. And so I see that as an overriding issue. And I don't want to be misconstrued. I'm not against wildlife and so on. We go off to the wildlife preserve down on 99W and hike and so on. So I'm definitely in that space. But I think that we have a balance here between, are we losing that additional X number of feet of this designated area in return for safer driving, less accidents, crashes, death, cost, and so on. The icing on the cake for me was when the caller came in and said that these wetlands are not really wetlands. They have been designated wetlands. I mean, I'm reading that as a Scrivener's error. And because it's not like there's a marsh there, right? So however they got designated as wetlands, if they're not really wetlands, then the argument falls apart to me.
So can I just interject just a
Sure.
little bit?
Just a little bit, yeah.
That same person was saying that if it's considered wetlands, his value is decreased and they would be taking part of it and the compensation would be less. So it's a personal level of money and not environment. And that was a lot of what I was hearing, was people worried that their value, they would be getting less money if you designated it a wetlands as if it wasn't. And that was their bottom line, was the green buck.
Okay, I maybe I misheard. I thought he was saying that because it was not a wetlands, I thought he was saying it was not a wetlands and therefore the value was less. Maybe somebody who else listened to this could correct me if I'm wrong. But either way, if it's not a wetlands, then it's a moot point.
Can I
Go ahead.
interject a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. So I think what he was saying is that his land is worth more if it's not considered a wetland, because he can develop it without any restrictions or having to do mitigations.
Okay.
So, and there's a mixture of things, complexities when we don't know what property we're talking about, and where it is in regards to the locations of the wetlands as described in the mapping. But as Tom mentioned earlier on, a lot of the acreage that we're talking about here is what's called buffer. So there's the actual wetland, which is your marsh or what have you, and then there's a 50-foot buffer around that. And that 50-foot buffer, from whenever they built when they built the highway originally, it could be fill, it could be whatever, it's stuff that is not natural and not environmental and supporting wildlife. So it's possible that the land in question might actually not be wetlands, but maybe buffers around wetlands. And the buffers are there to make sure that construction doesn't intrude close enough to the wetlands to cause the wetlands to degrade. And that's the purpose of that. So, and I guess what I would say about in terms of deliberations is, I agree with John that there's a lot of safety issues. The 217 has, it's been around for a while, and is not the safest area to be. It's like I was saying, there's standing water oftentimes, and potholes and all of those things. Also, there's untreated water that's going in, that's going into the environment that is compromising the environment. And there's a lot of talk about the fact that the wetlands in question are degraded, and we're not getting into the meat of, what the real condition, what is that condition really? Are there migrating birds? And this is an opportunity to consolidate and take the wetlands and create a higher quality wetlands that can be, and I've seen at our local parks where there's been a lot of repairs to wetlands, and they're thriving, and I've over the years have seen great improvements in the quality of the environment. And I guess I just would not knock the positive effects of mitigation in this situation, and then the fact that we're going to make the highway safer. We're going to increase the trail, better the trail system, and we're going to, even if it's not untitled, and also increase pedestrian and bicycle access on the overpasses, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess I would, I'm coming down on the positive side of the discussion.
Okay, before I get back to you all, thank you, Commissioner Watson. Let's go to Commissioner Jackson because he hasn't talked yet. Commissioner Jackson, let's go ahead.
So I'm not necessarily replying directly to the conversation that was just happening, but just kind of my overall take. So as I usually am, I'm somewhere very close to on the fence, but I fall to the support side slightly for some of the similar reasons that Commissioner Watson mentioned. From my understanding, the actual wetland that will be lost is around 34,000 square feet. But we will be gaining around 9,000 square feet of mitigation on site. That will be not wetland, but will be natural mitigated area. And we gain the addition of water treatment of all the water that's running off that road. In addition, I very much understand the perspective of, once it's paved and it's gone. I totally get that's a major sacrifice to make for us and for our environment. At the same time, these aren't exactly travel lanes we're adding. If these were just travel lanes, I would say no. These are auxiliary lanes for the purpose of safer merging and so forth. So my thought is, even if over the life of these improvements, it saves 1 or 2 human lives, to lose 33,000 square feet of wetland to save a few human lives seems worth it to me. It's a tough calculus to do. And, there's no happy answer there, but that's kind of where I end up.
Thank you. Commissioner Brooke, please go ahead.
Thanks. Actually, Commissioner Jackson said exactly how I wanted to say it, that clearly there's a reason we're using the word trade-off, because this isn't a clear-cut choice. But ultimately, I think the pros outweigh the cons, and I'm personally really excited about the improvements that are going to be made to the natural areas that are going to be preserved. Because looking around Tigard, I think some of our natural wetland areas have been neglected, or maybe something that's been built too close to it, and they are suffering. So I would like to see those natural areas be improved in any way they can. And I definitely value a safer traffic situation than preserving the amount of wetlands that will be removed. So I am in favor.
Thank you. Before I get back to you, Commissioner Dick and Roberts, I just want to ask if Commissioner Quinones or Commissioner Shook have any comments or feedback they would like to provide. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I did. But Commissioner Roberts and now just with Commissioner Brooke, they really wrapped up what I had to say. So thank you so much. I agree with the safer traffic. For somebody who has, especially riding public transportation, having a lane helps increase the amount of the faster ride, so then workforce can get to where they need to go on time. So something that needs to be taken into account as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Shook, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with that as well. One of the things when you're talking about wetlands and removing them, there's no positive about removing a wetland. So if you're only discussing wetlands, it's an obvious no. I mean, who would want wetlands removed? There has to be an overriding positive thing, and one of the positive things is we've talked about the need for housing and the employees that need to come into the city of Tigard, or the people that need to leave, and just the density that's going to be surrounding Washington Square. If it's difficult to get around now, it's just going to be even worse. And so those things aren't discussed when you're talking about should we remove a wetland, especially one that's degraded. And I agree with Commissioner Dick that, hey, Jackson Bottom is already a wetland, but they do improve it, and the cost that ODOT will have to pay is not trivial. It's a significant cost, and it does make an impact. So it's not something that's entirely gone forever. It's somewhere else has been improved. So in my mind, it's that trade-off, and I will vote to support the motion.
Thank you. Going back to you, Commissioner Dick, if you have any more comeback.
I do, and so you're talking about safer driving on 217. Well, the only way you're going to have safer driving on 217 is to remove everyone's cell phone, because I was the victim of an accident where the driver crossed 2 lanes and struck me in the designated Greenberg Road lane because she was texting. So having an auxiliary lane is not going to take away from dangerous drivers, irresponsible drivers, but removing wetlands is just wrong in my heart. And the only way to have safer drivers is to not have drivers at all. They text, they don't look, they run you over. And I was involved in this wreck just a few days ago, and it's devastating. She was cited. Thank you, Tiger. But the fact remains, you're always going to have people do that. I don't care how many lanes you're going to put out there. There's always going to be those drivers who are distracted and just think the road is theirs. And so to remove wetlands and say you're going to have safer driving, I just can't buy it. But it's a personal thing for me. But I am so pro wetlands, and I have been my entire life. Just saying.
All right.
I just
Thank you.
can't get forward. Thank you.
I'll say I'll go to Commissioner Roberts and then Commissioner Quinones.
Okay,
Commissioner Roberts.
just a little lagniappe here. My experience with the auxiliary, two aspects of this. People often use the auxiliary lanes as a way to bypass the exit and continue. They treat it as if it's a whole nother lane, a travel lane. And then at the last minute, what they do is they kind of jump back into the traffic because they never intended to get off in the beginning. I've seen that a lot. And in California, they call them cheater lanes. Having a longer auxiliary lane, though, I think is going to be helpful because, you know, as these auxiliary lanes join up, effectively, you're not forcing people. Those people don't go cutting in and out, in and out, in and out all the time. And I think that'll help. I 100% agree with the people being part of a big piece of the issue, with enforcement being an aspect. And I can't wait for autonomous cars that will just simply follow the rules. So that's my last little bit. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Quinones.
I won't say what I was going to say. I'll leave it with John Roberts. That was a great last comment, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali.
Shucks.
Commissioner Watson, you have more comments?
I just want to say, I hope I didn't come off as though I'm against wetlands. I don't like removing wetlands lightly.
No,
but
no,
quite
no problem.
frankly, the one of the main points that I want to make is that if there's untreated water with oil and plastic and rubber and all of that going into the water surrounding the highway, that's not good. And the water quality is if that's the case, then the water quality is compromised. And if we can treat the water in such a way, not only to increase drainage and improve things, but to make sure that that we're preserving water quality, that is an opportunity that we have with this project. And I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Commissioner Dick, you have one more chance to respond.
One more comment. I'm so for treating the water that runs off of 217, and I would be for that singular project to reduce all of the chemicals that are flowing into those wetlands, and that is the reason they have degraded, is because that was never done to begin with. And that is an important piece, that the water should be treated, removed, instead of letting it flow into the wetlands and depleting the wetlands. I am for that, but not removing the wetlands. Thanks.
Thank you. So I just want to conclude by saying that no offense to Commissioner Dick, but I agree with most of the commissioners that I believe this is a reasonable trade-off. I'm not against wetland, but but I believe this is a reasonable trade-off. As Commissioner Dick said, she favors water treatment, but a new water treatment facility or buildings, but that will not happen without building this auxiliary lane. So that's part of the trade-off that we are looking at, is what yes, nobody likes to remove wetland, but the mitigation factors and the trade-off we are facing, we have to balance them and make a recommendation to the city council of our opinions. So speaking of recommendations to the city council, commissioners, do you have a motion that you want to be considered by the full commission?
I feel like I'm a designated mover here.
Wonderful. So we are making a recommendation to the city council, and there is an approval condition. So please go ahead, Commissioner Roberts.
Okay, I think I've got this. I move the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council of applications CPA 2020-00003 and the Sensitive Lands Review SLR 2020-00010 and adoption of the findings and conditions of approval contained in the staff report and based on the testimony received.
Very, very well. I couldn't speak better myself. So before us, it's Commissioner Robert for a motion to recommend that he moved the Planning Commission for a recommendation of approval, in this case to the City Council, and adoption of findings and condition approval contained in the staff report and based on the testimony received. Before we go to second, do we have any questions, Commissioner? Any more debates, questions? No. All right, Commissioner Watson, would you like to second?
Yes, I would. That was beautiful, John.
Yeah, that was very well done, John. We're getting good at this, huh?
Yeah.
All right, so I see a message. Okay. Do I have it? Huh. Okay, anyway. So I will give you a few moments to consider the motion, and which has been second, and raise your hand. I'll give you, if you vote in favor, you want to vote in favor of the motion, I'll give you 5 seconds to raise your hand. Okay, so those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Okay, keep your hands up, please. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, I see 7 hands, so that's unanimous. We only have 7 voting commissioners today.
Cool.
Thank you. You can lower your hands now. So the motion passed unanimously. All right, so as Monica indicated, that the City Council is scheduled to hear this case on July 13th. So if you have any questions about this case or about the upcoming hearing, please contact the staff member. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to other business.
Good evening.
Evening, Tom. Please go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I just wanted to touch on schedule. So we have a joint meeting with City Council. Some of you have experienced those. Many of the newer folks have not. So, and we're doing it through Teams. So that'll be another unique experience. We haven't done that, but it's going to be a briefing, project briefing on the Tigard Made project and updating our industrial commercial lands. So we have a draft product employment opportunity analysis draft coming out of our consultant team, and some other things that have come out of the consultant team, and Hope Pollard, associate planner, will be there to brief both you and the council. And that's in July. And then we have one more hearing, quasi-judicial hearing scheduled for a project in August. And that's all we have right now. You can count on additional briefings and public hearings and decisions toward the end of the year. And once we get into October, November, December on both the Tigard Made project and the Washington Square Regional Center Plan District update. So both of those. And so that's update on the calendar. And then I believe everyone received email from President Hu. And my response, speaking of the Washington Square Regional Center. So I don't know how you want to handle this, but I'm happy to answer questions. I don't know I mean, I think I explained my sense of things in my email. What I would add to that is a number of times in the past year, City Council has acknowledged the work of the Planning Commission during their deliberations, and that didn't happen this time. So I'm wondering if that may have had a hand in the reaction, because they didn't. I know they didn't mention it. This was it was an odd hearing. The case that was previous went way longer than anybody expected, and kind of got the council behind schedule, kind of threw things off. And I don't want to speak for city councilors or the mayor, but in all fairness to them, they usually acknowledge the work that the Planning Commission does, and I know just in talking to them, they appreciate it. But I would emphasize that there's basically two things the Planning Commission does. One is make decisions on quasi-judicial plan development applications and historic applications. Those, you make the decision. Everything else, you are a policy advisory body to City Council, and I'm going to emphasize the advisory part, and City Council is under no obligation to take your advice, frankly. But having said that, again, in my discussions with them or in being in hearings with them, I know that they greatly value it. They are the ones that asked to have the minutes sent to them before they got a summary or they got the staff report. So, and they wanted the minutes because they wanted to know what the discussion was. And I've heard them on previous cases, bring up different points, different planning commissioners had brought up. So in this case, a couple things are happening. As I said, I haven't seen this happen too many times here in Tigard, but we had some very aggressive applicants, and several of them did not at all like the Planning Commission's decision, and so they were determined to continue to press their case. And so we see that sometimes. And as staff, it's our obligation to council to try to be ready for things, is try to seek to look for solutions. So that's what we continue to do. And I personally, I didn't feel that the policy change that the City Council made or accepted was a big enough deviation from what the Planning Commission decided. It was essentially the one property, the Macerich property. It's a big property, but I don't think the policy decision was a deviation, especially since they directed us to come back with the overall Washington Square plan with criteria to put car dealerships essentially through a conditional use that would focus on limiting the whatever conflicts might arise between the pedestrian environment and the traffic environment of the project. So that's kind of my sense of things. And I definitely want to stress that your time is not wasted. I know they listen. I mean, I know they hear it, but it is a nature of the situation, and this is the way it's set up across the state, is they are the elected officials, they get the final decision. So
yeah,
I would
Tom,
like to hear
yeah, thank you. My beef, the beef was not with the result. My beef was with the process, because to me, the applicant was the city, and our city law does require 2 hearings, even though City Council can ignore our advice at the end or whatever. But the city law does require 2 hearings, and the city was the applicant. So in our hearing, the applicant says, we want to do this, but in the city council hearing, the applicant said, we want to do this and that. And that, even though you think it's not very significant, to me, it's pretty significant because the sub-district map is more than twice as big as what the Planning Commission has recommended. So under city law, if we hear application A, and then city council was presented with application A plus B. So I wonder, under city law, does that application really receive 2 hearings? That's my concern. So I'm not a legal expert at that. So I would just leave it as, whatever. I don't think anybody ever going to challenge that in court or anything, but that's my concern, whether the process was followed. So my second concern is that even if it's okay for the city council to completely ignore us, you say that they value our input, but their action in this case, at least to me, demonstrate that they didn't value our input, right? Because if they were presented with an option from the applicant, which one, in this case, the city, that was not presented to the Planning Commission, if I were them, I would say, hey, Planning Commission hasn't listened to this, second option yet. Maybe we should send them back, even we ended up not disagreeing with them, at least we have their full advice, right? Informed advice, whatever that is. So that's the second. And then the third, to a lesser extent, I just feel like, Planning Commission many times is the only public input in this kind of cases, right? Because the general public is just too busy, or they don't know this is happening. So us, the 9 commissioners and 2 alternatives are only, most of the time, are the true public input to any major cases. So in this case, I feel like, okay, so this case was presented to us in public hearing, and then some, as you said, sophisticated landowner, maybe that's a code word for rich and powerful, who can hire fancy lawyers and lobbyists who just scoop in and then do some, I don't want to say backroom deal, but just feel to me like it's a backroom deal with city council, and the rich and powerful always get their way. Even though, to be honest, to me personally, I like the sub-district that passed by city council better, because after our hearing, I was actually thinking, oh, wait a minute, are we too harsh to the mall owner? Other than the Washington Square, other than the Wells Fargo properties that I don't think should have a car dealership, I actually think the rest of the Washington Square should have the option of becoming dealership, because they want the mall owner have the incentive to make it as attractive as possible. So actually, I agree with the city council at the end, but I'm just very, tiff at the process. It's like, if they can just make decision based on things that's not even presented to the Planning Commission, then why bother come to us in the first place? I mean, I'm fine with them making all the decision on their own. Don't come to us if you're not going to see our, full advice. So that's my beef. So maybe I'm just too overreactive. I just think that, we planning commissioners are, we are busy people, and we all want to help, the city. That's why we volunteer to be planning commissioners. And, of course, I agree with you that the city council can do whatever they want in this case, because they have the power, because they have a great responsibility, because they have elected city leaders. They have to face the voters. We planning commission don't. I don't expect them to agree with us all the time. I don't even expect other planning commissioner to agree with me all the time. Like Commissioner Dick didn't agree with any of us. That's fine. But I just want the process to be followed, So that's why I brought up the possibility of, I don't know if that's even possible, of asking city council to have a more exact standard in this case, in this type of cases, to say, hey, if the applicant presents something that's not presented in planning commission hearing, maybe you should, as a courtesy, send it back to us, let us consider everything before we make a meaningful recommendation. So I'll just leave it like that. So other Commissioner Dick and Commissioner Quinones have comments, so please go ahead.
Yeah, I think my question would be too, is that wasn't this a quasi-judicial?
No.
It wasn't? Oh, okay. Well, then my comment is moot. Thank you.
So my comment is, and I know what the commissioners heard, and it was the presentation they received, but it felt like bait and switch. We heard one, they heard the other. And to me, that's just wrong on so many levels. But how does the council know that they heard a different one than we did, I guess? And there needs to be rules that we receive the same presentation, I think, that they're going to present to city council, because it's unfair to all of us who listened to one presentation and then they got together and said, oh, let's do this. And it was pushed in a completely different presentation. That was really unfair to everyone on this committee, in my estimation. Thank you.
Okay, I thought of another question. Was this reviewed by the city lawyer?
Yes, city attorney was part of the whole discussion. Yep. So I don't know when you want me to jump in to try to answer all these statements or questions, but
go ahead, Tom.
All right. Well, first, process. So the process was followed. There was no not following the process. And again, I'm going to emphasize it's a legislative process. I've told you for years the legislative process is wide open. That's why you as planning commissioners get to bring anything you want to bring to the hearing, to bring to that process. You don't like cars because of so many reasons, so you don't want to change the regulations to allow more car dealerships. That's your personal opinion. You could bring that to the hearing and you can make that statement to the rest of the commission. It's absolutely wide open. That's the way the system in Oregon is set up. And it is, again, it's not unusual in my experience in other jurisdictions for things to get changed between planning commission and city council on legislative projects. And this was a prime example of that, because in legislative projects, all the way through every part of the process, the public can make comments and ask for changes, and so it's just part of the process. It's a very iterative process. We try as hard as we can to get things wrapped up before we get to planning commission. I mean, we try really hard, but in this case, some additional things came up, and frankly, there were some things that we didn't even think about that you get into discussions with the lawyers, and some other ideas come up. So, and I want to emphasize, at the hearing with the city council, we represent the planning commission. So we presented the planning commission's decision. We made that one small text change to make the language a little clearer. And then the other things, we didn't present those things to the city council. We had some options that we had worked on, and if the city council was open to entertaining the ideas of the property owners, we were prepared to present them with options. And so that's what we did. And council, decided to go with that. They wanted to compromise. They wanted to find a way to get basically all the property owners on board. And so that happens. I would go back to the tree code. The tree code was a huge project. The tree code had an entire citizen advisory committee that worked for a year or more coming up with the tree code regulations. It went to the planning commission. The planning commission recommended it to city council. The city council made a big policy change to the tree code. And there were some planning commissioners that were actually upset about that. And but that's the process. The city councilors had their own reasons for the way how they did that. And the same thing happened with the Tiger Triangle. If some of you were, I can't remember if you were here with us when we adopted the Tiger Triangle, the again, a dealership, the auto dealership in the Triangle came to council asking for some additional changes in the code language, and we, you know, worked out a compromise with them. So the council is balancing all these things, and they expect the staff to try to work out issues. If we can work out something with an applicant or a property owner, I shouldn't say applicant, if we can work out something out with the public or a property owner, developer, you know, we try to do that as long as we can stick to the policy, the underlying policy of the, you know, regulations we're trying to create. So, you know, I can understand why you're frustrated with it, but that is the policy, that is the process, that is the nature of the legislative process. You're welcome to, as we meet the city council in a joint session, I would welcome you to, you know, ask the city council about their kinds of decisions, if they're going to be in a position where they're going to go against a planning commission decision. You can ask them about that, but in talking with the city attorney, the city attorney was involved in the whole process all the way through. And then I've also talked to her since she's seen the email exchange, and I've talked to her about this issue, and it's Oregon law. It's the way it's set up. There's not really a way we can work out some type of regulation to put in the code that says when council's going to send something back to the planning commission. We didn't even have actually in the code previously, if you remember, before we changed it, what was it, 2-3 years ago, that the option to remand back to the planning commission wasn't even in the code. So we added that in the last time we updated the language.
Commissioners.
Is that helpful at all? Or is there still a lot of frustration?
Well, I understand the legal aspect of it, but you know, I'm not trying to attack you or anything, Tom, and you don't have to defend the city council. You just said city council value our opinion, but in this case, as Darlene said, it's feel like bait and switch, and you know, our opinion just doesn't feel. Our opinion will matter much, even though at the end, as I said, I agree with city council's map a lot more than what we recommended. I don't think you can blame me for feeling deflated and feeling like, what's the point if they're just going to do whatever they want without coming back up when they get new information. So, so commissioners, do you have any? Is there a lot of, other than Darlene and I, do we have any interest? I don't know how to approach the city council about this politely anyway. I mean, it's like.
We based an opinion on a presentation that was given to us as like the Holy Grail that they were looking at. And then they gave another presentation to city council. So our recommendation was based on apples and oranges, so to speak. And it kind of left us out looking like we didn't agree when the end result was okay.
Right.
It was the process and what information we received to what information the council received. And so therefore our opinion and what was written was based upon something entirely different. And that's the disconnect in my opinion.
Yeah, Jamie and John, go ahead.
Mine, very briefly, I was not offended. I think that we provide a baseline of information and a recommendation, but it's the baseline, and other data may come in that we don't see necessarily after the fact. If it was substantial, I think they'd probably come back to us, but I wasn't offended. I just figured we're a big part. We're probably like 80-90% of what they consider, but there's a little bit more. So I felt okay with it.
Yeah, Jamie, you nod your head.
Yes, I agree with John, so the legislative process, and Tom can correct me if I say something erroneous, but it's basically my understanding of it, it's like a design process. So the city, works with everybody, and they come up with what they think is at that point a good idea, and then they present that to us. It's not a holy grail. It's just, here we are, and we need feedback and a recommendation from you with this information. And then they take that, and then they have lawyers call them, or they have other information come out, or what have you, or, gosh, they could even disagree with what we have to say in terms of their understanding of the code and how the code should be shaped as we move forward, and ordinances and all that stuff. Anyway, so I would counsel that to not look at this as a bait and switch, but rather we were a step along the way, and there was an evolution that occurred after that, and that they gave the council some additional options that they decided to take with the information that they had at the time. So that's how I see it, and I think it's I think that's a good way of thinking about it.
Okay, Craig?
I agree with you, Yi. I'm kind of a process person, and it seems like 1 + 1 + 1 is 3. So you're like, it's just like we just made a recommendation to the council tonight, and if a different wetland thing went to the council, we'd all go, well, wait a second, Darlene didn't get to address that, I'm with you. So you're not questioning the decision or their right to do whatever they want. You're just saying, well, wait a second, what's the process? And if there is a process, we should follow it. And I'm hearing the other commissioners say they have flexibility, and it's like, well, okay, but what's the process? So I agree with you, but I respect the fact that they don't have to listen to, we don't have to listen to anybody either, right? we can make up our own mind too. So that's my thought.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. The similar situation for you would be like when the tree code was done, they had a citizen advisory committee, and this happens sometimes. Well, most of our big projects, the Washington Square update has a citizen advisory committee. They could come forward, and you could be a member of that citizen advisory committee, and you as the planning commission could make changes to the recommendation. And the folks on the citizen advisory committee, I don't think they're going to feel like their time was wasted if you guys change it's part of the process. The public information comes in, lots of different opinions are thrown out, people are looking at different details and coming at it from different ways. So I keep hearing about the process, and I'm going to push back really hard and tell you that the process was followed. Yeah. That's why, if you remember the planning commissioner briefings at the very start, when I meet with all the new commissioners, I try to emphasize the difference between quasi-judicial and legislative. So tonight was quasi-judicial. Very strict process. Nothing is going to change between now and city council on that one, because that would be illegal. Legislative, I'm telling you, it's wide open, wide open.
So the case we just had, the city, we are still only making a recommendation though. So
correct.
So we didn't make any decision. So how's that? Anyway,
that's because it's a quasi-judicial case, but it's a comprehensive plan amendment, and the council gets the ultimate decision on the comprehensive plan. So it's a special process. You make a recommendation to council, they make the final decision.
So if ODOT for some reason come back with additional options to city council, does the city council have to remand back to us in this, or?
In this case, they would, yeah. If ODOT add something different, you know, a different section that they didn't talk about, yeah, it would absolutely have to come back.
Okay.
They can't add anything more. No. It's quasi judicial, so the record is locked basically.
Okay. I mean, I guess we don't, other than Craig and I, who are the voting member who want to bring this up as council, doesn't seem like anybody else want to. So I guess I would just drop it and adjust my expectation accordingly in the future.
I don't think you should drop it. I think we should actually mention it. I know I'm not a voting member, but I've been on many corporate committees and offerings, and I think if something isn't kind of said and choosing the right words, that things should never go unsaid, I guess, at the end of the day. And if they just know that it was a concern for us, that we sent them a decision based upon what we were presented and they received a different presentation, this is a concern to us, that it just seems wrong in the corporate world. To me, it would be really wrong in a corporation to do that. So I look at it that way for us as citizens on a commission.
Oh, well, I understand, but I have to speak on behalf of the commission, and if I don't have the majority support, I don't think I should, you know, say that.
That's sad.
So.
That's sad. I'm for you.
It's fine. I understand this the process. So Tom, do we have to prepare anything for the joint meeting, or are we just sitting in for the presentation? Do I have to do anything? That's my question.
No. You'll just be there for the presentation, and then once the presentation's over, then it's a discussion like any other briefing that you have. You'll just have the city councilors in the discussion with you.
And in that hearing, the city council will be will run the meeting. So
yes, the mayor.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Good.
Yep.
So I can finally sit back for once.
you can sit back and relax. Yeah. Just enjoy the ride. Yeah. And it's a briefing. It's not a hearing. So.
Okay. Great.
There won't be any public testimony, anything like that. It's just a briefing. The staff will do their presentation, and then you'll get to, just like the previous Tigard made briefings and some of the Washington Square briefings and the River Terrace briefings, then you'll get to listen to the presentation, and then you get to ask questions, make comments, have a conversation with the council.
Okay, great. Anything else, Tom?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Commissioner, do you have any questions or comments? No. Okay. All right. So thank you, everybody, for a good hearing, and thank you, Tom. Thank you, Doreen.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you, Keelan. I never got to thank you before. And
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.